This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
African leaders rule out extending South Sudan's February 22nd peace deadline. Jihadists kill at least 30 people in northern Nigeria. And we have the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. And here with the latest in business news is Uche.
Thanks, Hannah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Nigeria's crude oil and gas exports bring in over $500 million in revenue. And Egypt's inflation rises to 7.2% in January. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Uche. We'll see you in a bit. But for now, let's begin in Addis Ababa, where East African bloc IGAD says the further extension is neither desirable nor feasible in the implementation of a peace deal in South Sudan. President Salva Kiir on Sunday received a 5-day deadline from the East African nation bloc to decide on state boundaries in the country. Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar also have until February 22nd to form a power-sharing agreement. The establishment of the Transitional Authority has been delayed twice last year. Kiir and Machar met on Sunday in Ethiopia on the sidelines of the African Union Summit, but they made no breakthrough to resolve their dispute over the number of regional states. This has been a contentious issue because the borders will set out divisions of power and control in the country. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has also piled pressure on the South Sudan rivals, telling them it is unacceptable not to join forces in government ahead of the deadline. Well, for more on that story, as well as the latest from the African Union Summit, we're now joined by CGTN's Giram Chala, who is in Addis Ababa. Giram, thank you so much for joining us. Giram, we understand that IGAD will not be extending the deadline to form the government of national unity in South Sudan. What more can you tell us, and what happens if the deadline is not met?
So let's begin with why the African Union or other parties in this peace process are not willing to extend this deadline of forming the transitional government of national unity, because there has been so much time that has been lost in the middle when South Sudan is grappling with so many challenges, including war and other problems. People of South Sudan are suffering, so the international community is growing intolerant about these things. They are saying that we have given the parties time more than that is required to bring this peace into reality. So the African Union or IGAD or UN or other parties included in this process are not willing to extend an inch to the deadline that has been already given to the two sides. One. Two, what more can be done is the question here. The African Union time and again has been saying, okay, we'll be placing sanctions against South Sudan. You know that the United States is part of the South Sudan peace process, as China is at the same time. There are travel bans by the United States, which can also be taken as measures taken by the parties in this peace process, and also freezing assets and other things have been tried before. So other drastic measures which are not exclusively talked about can be taken against the parties which are part of this process, more specifically the government of South Sudan and that of Riek Machar's group. But we don't exactly know what's going to happen. But for now, we know that the African Union and other parties are so firm that they are not willing to move an inch from the deadline.
Giram, talking about the African Union, let's talk about the Heads of State Summit, which has come to a close now. What measures are expected to come from that meeting, specifically on the issue of security on the African continent?
As you know, the theme this year, 2020 African Union Heads of State Summit, is silencing the guns and creating conducive environment for development. Now, these two things are very important for the African Union. You know that the 50 years plan of the continent, Agenda 2063, is now struggling to show success. Why? Because of the insecurity in the continent, conflict here and there, to mention in Libya, for instance. The Sahel situation is alarming every single day. Somalia is still a problem that is not solved. the Central African Republic, Mali. So heads of state here are saying, okay, look, we have not achieved 2020 to silence our guns, but can we achieve it as soon as possible? So we are expecting, one, the rescheduling of this silencing the guns by 2020 plan. But the sooner they are going to do it, the better for the plans that they have in mind to achieve, which is the development aspect of it. So what we are expecting is, yes, the 2020 silencing of the guns will be extended a little bit as a project, a plan from the continent, one. Two, but more commitment from member states is expected as perhaps a resolution that is going to come out tonight, perhaps around midnight Addis Ababa time. So this is the most important decision that we're expecting. But the others, financing of the union, because member states need to contribute because financial independence is needed, and also about other development situations, economic situations, including the Africa Continental Free Trade Area decisions, need to be made so that these things can be seen on the ground in reality. But peace and security is the agenda. We're expecting stronger resolutions to come out soon.
Definitely a major challenge that a lot of people on the African continent are hoping there will be solutions to. Thank you so much, Girim Chala, joining us live from Addis Ababa. Well, the African Union will be holding a summit in May focused on ending regional conflicts and wars. Heads of state will meet in South Africa to discuss the AU target to silence guns by the end of 2020. Well, CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy has more on that story.
African countries are ready to go an extra mile in dealing with the security situation in the Sahel. In a rather determined move aimed at addressing the crisis, additional $10 million has been contributed to the AU Peace Fund from member states. The African Union Peace and Security Council is also looking at the possibility of training more troops to better handle the situation in the Sahel.
We need to harmonize also the training of our troops, better equip them, and we are going to revisit the conducts of the G5 Sahel force at their demand so that they can now address and focus on a region called Liptako-Gourma, which is the border between the three countries, that's Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso.
On Libya, the African Union Peace and Security Council has resolved to set up a contact committee on Libya to try and implement the Brazzaville Agreement.
We want the cessation of hostility to be fully respected. We want the UN embargo on armaments to Libya also to be strictly respected. And third, we want immediate cessation of all external interventions and interferences in Libyan affairs.
The African Union also welcomed the ongoing talks in Sudan and commended the US for a positive gesture in trying to restore sanity in the African country. The Council, however, says the current sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe and Sudan are immoral, demanding they be lifted. The AU delegation is expected to visit the EU and the US in an attempt to address the Sudan-Zimbabwe sanctions. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And now we bring you the latest on the coronavirus outbreak. The total number of confirmed cases in China has surpassed 40,000. The death toll stands at 909, with more than 3,500 people have recovered. More than half of the confirmed cases and most of the deaths are in Hubei province, where the epidemic began. Newly confirmed cases outside Hubei have dropped for 6 consecutive days by nearly 50% compared to the highest number on February the 3rd. Guangdong, Zhejiang, and Henan provinces are the areas with the most cases outside Hubei, with each reporting more than 1,000 cases. Beijing has reported over 330 cases, while Shanghai close to 300. The virus has spread to 24 other countries, with a total of 388 confirmed cases outside of China. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping has been visiting hospitals, disease control centers, and local communities in Beijing that are fighting the coronavirus outbreak. CGTN's Wang Qiao has more.
非常时期就不握手了，但是咱们呢，但是一定要有信心，没问题，一定可以克服这场疫情。祝你们生活愉快，身体健康。好的，好的。
This is a local community in Beijing's Chaoyang district, one of the biggest districts in the Chinese capital. President Xi Jinping visited the area to inspect epidemic prevention strategies, as well as the supply of daily necessities. He praised the disease control measures in place and urged for similar efforts from communities nationwide. Xi also visited the Ditang Hospital, where the first coronavirus case in Beijing was confirmed. He checked on patients through footage from security cameras and shared words of encouragement to healthcare workers on duty.
信心百倍地打好这一场阻击战，总体战，打好这一场人民战争。我们一定要树立信心，一定会胜利的。
Xi also held a video chat with medical staff on the front lines in Wuhan, specifically in major designated treatment hospitals such as Jingtan, Xiehe, and the newly built Huoshen-Shan.
我代表党中央，向你们，也向全国在抗击疫情战斗中的医护工作者，致以崇高的敬意和衷心的感谢。
Xi encouraged them to make every effort to save lives and at the same time make sure to protect themselves. He then listened in for reports, feedback, and suggestions from the central guiding team in Hubei province. Xi also paid a visit to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Chaoyang. There, he acknowledged how the epidemic has posed a challenge to all disease control and prevention centers in the country. He stressed the importance of research, law enforcement, and modernization of the mechanisms currently in place. He said concerted efforts from all parties are necessary to overcome the outbreak. Wang Xiao, CGTN.
Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry says 27 foreigners in the country have been infected by the novel coronavirus. Of those, 2 have died, 3 have recovered and been discharged from hospital. The remaining are in isolation. A spokesperson says the country is saddened by the loss of a Chinese American who succumbed to the illness 4 days ago. Authorities have been in contact with the family of the deceased. The spokesperson went on to say that China was doing its best to protect the health and safety of all foreign nationals in Wuhan, as well as assisting with the evacuation of foreign nationals in whatever way it could. He reiterated that the WHO's recommendations to practice good hygiene and avoid gatherings. Several African leaders, as well as the president of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, and the director of economic affairs in the AU Commission, Jean-Denis Gabikini, have commended China's efforts to prevent and control the coronavirus epidemic. The leaders say the measures taken by China to lock down some of its cities, more particularly that of Wuhan, is tremendous and portrays China's responsibility to its people and the rest of the world. Well, let's now take a short break and return. More news making headlines. Jihadists kill at least 30 people in northern Nigeria. And the United Nations warns of escalating food insecurity on the African continent.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching news making headlines on Africa Live. Well, in Nigeria, where suspected Boko Haram insurgents have killed at least 30 people, the attackers also abducted people, including women and children. The Sunday attack on passengers occurred in Awono, town 20 kilometers from Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State. The state governor and state insurgents set fire to 18 vehicles during the raid. Senegal's army chief stated that insurgents have resorted to attacking soft targets, including road travelers. Meanwhile, we're staying in Nigeria, where an unknown disease has killed 15 people in the northern part of the country. Medical experts say the disease does not appear to be Ebola, Lassa fever, or the coronavirus. With more details, here's Ifiok Etang reporting from Jos.
The Nigerian Center for Disease Control, or the NCDC, has revealed that it is investigating the outbreak of an unknown disease. The outbreak of the disease first occurred in Obi local government area of Benue State on January 29th. The symptoms include vomiting, swelling, and diarrhea. The Director General of the NCDC, Chikwe Hekwezu, says the agency is taking the necessary measures to effectively manage it. The Nigerian Senator, Abba Moro, who represents the affected district, said a number of the victims all died within 48 hours. The Minister of Health said the illness did not appear to be Ebola or Lassa fever, two potentially deadly viruses that have plagued West Africa, nor did it appear to be coronavirus. The Nigerian Senate have asked the Federal Ministry of Health to further investigate the disease and also mobilize health personnel to the affected area. It is suspected that a chemical used in fishing in the region may be responsible for the deaths, but for now, water samples from the affected regions are being analyzed to try to discover the root cause. Ifiok Etang, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says several countries in Africa run the risk of hunger. According to 2019 global report on food crises released by the FAO and partners, some 14 African countries are currently experiencing at least one form of conflict, including ethnic and resource-based conflict, civil unrest, and terrorism.
Instability on our continent is causing rural farmers to flee to urban areas, increasing the demand for foods and hiking commodity prices.
According to FAO, latest figures on the state of global food security and nutrition, nearly 256 million people on the African continent suffer from severe food insecurity. Hunger is on the rise, with 20% of population suffering from undernourishment.
We move to South Africa now, where residents of Mandela Park Township have been protesting water shortages. The week-long riots were sparked by the death of an 8-year-old girl who drowned in a filthy stream while trying to collect water. CGTN's Tulisha Balala has more.
8-year-old Musa and her older sister Moleboheng went down this ravine with buckets and drum bottles to fetch water, but only one of them returned. The little girl drowned in the stream filled with sewage, mud and algae.
2 boys who live nearby got into the stream looking for my daughter, and one of them found her dead. It was the community that found her.
The girls were thirsty and tired of waiting for trucks meant to deliver emergency water.
My child died because we don't have water, and even now my situation hasn't changed. We still do not have water. I know I'm going to find myself having to get water from the same stream where my daughter died.
Musa's death has further inflamed the mood among residents of Mandela Park Township. Protesters torched shops, overturned government vehicles and hurled bricks and bottles at riot police, who responded with rubber bullets.
It rains a lot here. It rains, but the municipality keeps telling us there's no water.
The streams have drowned a number of people here, even children. When you try to save them from drowning, you get arrested for trespassing. Right now, there's no water at all. The taps are dry, but when we protest and block the roads, we get water, and when we stop, the water stops too.
South Africans have protested for years over unreliable supplies of water and power. But chronic mismanagement has been compounded by effects of the heavy rainfall and drought. South Africa's Water Minister Lindiwe Sisulu has promised $203 million to end the shortages in Qwaqwa. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Nigeria's pidgin English has evolved over the years and gained not only national acceptance but also global recognition. The recent inclusion of some pidgin English words in the Oxford English Dictionary further demonstrates this. But Nigeria still ranks behind other African countries like Kenya, for instance, in global English fluency. Here's more from CGTN's Kelechi Emekelam.
Veteran broadcaster and human rights activist Ahmed Issa runs one of the most popular shows on radio, addressing major societal issues and human rights violations, especially against the downtrodden. Ahmed's Berekete family show is transmitted in pidgin English, and he has successfully garnered a wide range of listeners.
With pidgin English, you can cut across all the classes we have. There is hardly any big man in this country that does not understand pidgin.
The Nigerian pidgin was viewed as a debasement of the English language a while back, but it has gained global fame, especially with the recent addition of some words to the Oxford Dictionary. And many, like Ahmed, view the popularity as a feat long expected.
The West is beginning to recognize the fact that we are a force to be reckoned with. You know, there's nothing too special about the English language apart from the fact that it is used for communication. Any language you can use for communication, and once you can communicate effectively, is an authority when it comes to communication.
In spite of its contribution to English language globally, Nigeria still ranks behind African countries like South Africa and Kenya in terms of English fluency. Many here believe that pidgin English has given citizens a unique voice across the globe.
If you go to Kenya, after their dialects like normal traditional languages and all that, it's only English that they speak. But Nigeria, if you come, we have what we speak in the streets, like pidgin English.
But most people believe that since English is now our mother tongue, you understand, it's not a problem. They believe that they can speak their mother tongue and there's no problem.
So far, there are 29 new additions from Nigerian English into the Oxford Dictionary, and they've been used since the 1970s. Nigeria is a multi-ethnic nation with over 520 languages spoken across the country. But the pidgin English is at the center, widely understood by both the highly educated and non-literates. Kelechi Emekelam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, that's it for me for now, but I will be standing by to bring you more news making headlines, including all your sport action. But for now, here's Uche with the latest in business.
Thank you, Hannah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Nigeria's crude oil and gas exports bring in over $500 million in revenue. And Egypt's inflation rises to 7.2% in January.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, Who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nigeria. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Nigeria. The country made total revenues of $504.4 million from its crude oil and gas exports in November last year. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation confirmed the amount earned represents an improvement of about 4.39% from the previous exports. Crude oil sales contributed to $383.9 million, while export gas sales amounted to $120.6 million. Now, in spite of the improvement recorded in the country's exports in the month under review, the NNPC has suffered 94% increase in the case of willful hacking and destruction of its pipeline infrastructure across the country. Well, still in Nigeria, the government has put in place some drastic measures to spur rice production in the country. It closed Nigeria's land borders since August. That was to curb the smuggling and give a boost to local farmers. But many of them say they're still struggling to meet increasing demand and that the price of rice has increased. Ifyok Etang reports from Jos, North Central Nigeria.
Much of the work on this rice mill is done by hand or by foot. 47-year-old Joshua Binko moves his legs through his rice harvest to help it dry faster. Since the closing of the country's borders 6 months ago, he's seen profits go up.
This closing border help a farmer a lot because there is no any foreign rice will come out again from outside that will come to Nigeria.
Small-scale farmers like Binko account for about 80% of locally produced rice in Nigeria. He says it's difficult to meet increased demand without better access to modern farm machinery, irrigation, and fertilizers. And the need for improved technology goes all the way from the field to the finished product.
We don't have a convenient environment to work in, and we lack basic needs like water and electricity.
According to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, Nigeria is a leading consumer and one of the largest producers of rice in Africa. But Nigeria's ban on imported rice has led to an increase in the price of domestically produced rice. Kindergarten nanny Tabitha Amos says she struggles to buy enough rice to feed her 4 boys.
The way the rice is costly now, we are not enjoying it because our salary before, that is how the salary is now, nothing has increased.
A 50-kilogram bag of Nigerian rice costs around $38, 50% more than it cost before the border closure in August. Rice is one of the most consumed staples amongst Nigerians. Experts say in the past decade, consumption has increased by 4.7%, almost 4 times global consumption growth. And the plan to close the borders to imported rice is part of a plan to grow the Nigerian economy.
In the long run, we may be the sole or greatest exporters of rice in Africa. But till then, there are a lot of sacrifices we have started making and we are still going to make.
And for farmers like Joshua Binko, the government asks for patience. It's planning to subsidize equipment for small farmers so they can boost the rice yield and help Nigeria feed itself. Ifyok Etang, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
And in Egypt, inflation has risen to 7.2% in January compared to the previous 7.1% in December. Now, this, of course, defied expectations of a drop that was set to pave the way for interest rate cuts by the central bank. Price growth has accelerated, including a 1.7% increase in food prices, despite the intervention by the government to provide staple products at below market rates. With inflation remaining within the central bank's target range of 9%, a rate cut could still be expected. After 4 rate cuts last year, the real yield remains attractive to fixed income investors, as of course the bank aims to restart monetary easing. And moving on, President Cyril Ramaphosa has opposed the proposal to cut some of South African Airways' domestic routes. The comments come after business rescuers proposed cancelling flights to Durban, East London and Port Elizabeth from February 29th. The rescue team says this will make SAA sustainable and free from government funding after the restructuring effort. Now, despite the government's objections, the specialists are entitled to make the final decisions under South Africa's company laws. SAA is among several state entities that are drowning in debt after nearly a decade of mismanagement, as Angela Coppola reports.
The airline has cancelled several flights since mid-January. At the beginning of February, it announced that retrenchments were now unavoidable.
The difficulty is that when you've got an ailing airline with challenges in terms of meeting some of the short-term targets, with huge pressure in terms of debt repayments, tough decisions have to be made. The consequences of that is obviously that SAA will not need all of the staff that they currently have, because they have less routes and obviously less need for different staff in this environment.
Some 100 flights will be cancelled by the end of February. One labour union with members at SAA wasn't surprised by the move to cut routes so drastically.
We expected a radical restructuring, and stopping loss-making routes is one of the things that was an option on the table. We're not that necessarily fussed about the announcement of the routes that are being stopped. What we are quite angry about, however, is announcing retrenchments without actually announcing your business rescue plan, which means we're basically retrenching as a knee-jerk reaction to cash flow, and that's not the way you're going to save this airline. You're not going to retrench yourself into profit.
Analysts see this as a first step in a strategy to save the airline, but they want more details.
We've got to find a way where we can support the airline, but at the same time provide a way in which the airline can provide certainty to the market, and also perhaps put a proper plan in place in terms of the long-term sustainability of the airline.
All the stakeholders involved in the airline want it to survive.
We, from the very start, said an airline like SAA can be saved, but I don't think we were under any illusions that the SAA that emerges from this process would look vastly different than the one we had before. You could not continue with business as usual. That ended up with a 6 billion rand net loss every single year.
While solutions are being sought, criticism has been levelled at the business rescue practitioners for the way they have dealt with the unions.
Our worry is, in order to enact a turnaround here, you will need all stakeholders to be completely bought in and on board. And sidestepping labour like this means that you're basically setting yourself up for failure.
While the business rescue practitioners negotiate that path between what's happening on the politics and what's happening in terms of unions, they seem to have the best interests of the airline at heart. We'll have to see if they get it right, though. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, predictions by the African Development Bank's macroeconomics policy have confirmed that Africa has not been affected by the deadly outbreak of the coronavirus. The research department says the extent to which the virus will affect trade between China and Africa depends on how the epidemic is contained.
So far, we have not seen confirmed cases in the continent. To the extent of how much this actually will impact China or transmit globally will really drive the impact at the end of the day for Africa. And this will be through a number of channels, through trade. China is a significant trade partner for the continent. It will be also through tourism, as China in recent years have grown to be the second largest source of tourism in the continent. And also through impact on investment through both confidence and uncertainty, and how this could weigh on investment flows to the continent.
Meanwhile, several African leaders, as well as the president of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina, and the director of economic affairs in the AU Commission, Jean-Denis Gabikini, have commended China's efforts to prevent and control the coronavirus epidemic. The leaders are saying that the measures taken by China to lock down some of its cities, more particularly that of Wuhan, is tremendous and portrays China's responsibility to its people and the rest of the world.
Well, I don't think anything wrong with it because this was done when we had Ebola in West and Central Africa. You know, they locked down particular towns. People couldn't move. You know, I mean, you take the case of agriculture. When you have the even foot and mouth disease, you cordon off particular areas where those things are. Whether it is also avian influenza, you know, a problem with that, they have to cordon off areas where that is. So whenever you have a contagion effect, it's a normal thing that you do. You know, you restrict movement, and so it's not anything unusual. This is always done when you have epidemiology of diseases. Well, I think that any time that you have an incidence of exogenous shocks from health, it is not just an issue for a country. It's an issue for the global commons. And so we are all in it together. That can happen in any part of the world, and we will be in the same thing. I think the Chinese are doing a fantastic job of trying to contain it the best they can. Obviously, you know, with the WHO providing the support that is needed, everybody's working around the clock around the world to find the vaccines for us to deal with this. You know, my heart goes out to all the people that have been affected and that have died from this. You know, a single death from any disease, from any infection, is one death too many. And so we are all in it together. It's not a question of any country and so on. We live in a global commons, and anything that affects any country can easily have impact everybody else. So we must have a collective global solution on it and continue to encourage the Chinese government in all they're doing.
You must remember that the coronavirus can spread very quickly, and the Chinese population is very dense and huge. So I think for the Chinese to do that was a wise thing. We also applaud them for the sterling work they're doing. It's remarkable. I mean, the hospital they've built and all the efforts they've put into controlling this virus, because they are not only doing it for the Chinese, but for the world, because the world is a global village. An outbreak in one country can quickly spread to the rest of the world, but they've done a wonderful job to contain it.
Well, the Chinese know the situation better than anyone else. It's local with them. So we agree with whatever measure is they're doing. We trusted the wisdom of the Chinese government and the Chinese people. We know Chinese government, Chinese people are doing not only for China but for the whole world to contain the coronavirus.
We think that just to make sure not to affect others, it's a good move to lock the city so that within that city they will be able to control the situation and then to prevent other cities and other environment to get contaminated. So for us, economically speaking, it's a good move. The general effort that China is doing for us is really amazing. They are doing well because we also learned that they built an hospital in 9 days, and that's really something that must be encouraged and make sure that they are doing well, and they need support. We must make sure to come together and to make sure that Chinese, they can control and stop that virus.
I have read actually the World Health Organization reports, international reports, and they are all actually appreciating what China is doing. Of course, we cannot say that thankfully that epidemic has happened in China, but in a way, maybe if it happened in a country without this such great experience, maybe it could have been very dangerous to the whole world. And I think China is doing very well with that, and they have the experience of working in such environment, and they have the facilities even, which many countries of the world they don't have. And I think the way also they handle the Wuhan areas was very good, and they maintain, the health situation in a good way. At the same time, they have facilitated for the countries who want to bring their students or citizens who live in Wuhan area in a very also respectful way, because they have helped a lot, and we hope that in a very short time they will overcome this problem.
Now, Chinese authorities have put measures in place to support businesses as they resume production after the extended Spring Festival holiday. The Chinese Spring Festival holiday, scheduled to end on the 30th of January, was officially extended to the 2nd of February in an effort to contain spreading of the novel coronavirus. Many local governments have introduced several measures to support businesses. They include increasing fiscal and tax support, reducing rentals, and exempting businesses from regular quota tax. Currently, the total number of confirmed cases in China has surpassed 40,000, with the death toll standing at more than 900.
The government has provided great help to our enterprises to tide over the difficulties and resume production earlier. They pointed out some weaknesses for us, and we corrected them as soon as possible.
We have already set up a working group to deal with the epidemic. All of our workers have returned to their posts.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But later on Global Business Africa, U.S. President Donald Trump is set to cut foreign aid as he releases a $4.8 trillion budget proposal for the 2021 financial year. All that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Hannah.
We'll see you in a bit, Uche. Thank you so much. But for now, let's take a short break. And here's what you can expect when we return. Find out how one Nigerian man is raking in good profits from building boats.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, canoes are among the oldest means of transportation in Nigeria, particularly in riverine areas of the country. Today, the use of ferries and ships are a common feature on Nigerian waterways, but the canoe continues to hold its own. At the very heart of Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, there's a canoe-making enterprise which has been in business for over 3 decades, and it's still thriving. CGTN's David Badmus brings us that story.
At 64, he's still arguably the most prolific local boat builder in Nigeria. Oluwalogbon Temituru started out as a fisherman before branching off into canoe making. He's since gone a step further into making engine-powered fiber boats. Most of the locally made boats on Lagos waterways are made in his workshop here.
One day, I approached some marine policemen and told them that I can make them a boat better than the scrap boats they were driving. Their boss asked, how much will I do it? I told him 200,000, and he gave me 1 million naira to produce 5, and then I developed my brain and became better on the job.
His business has since grown bigger from that point, producing boats of all shapes and sizes, either from tree trunks or fiber.
Some years, business will move. I can do almost 200 boats per year. Some years, it can come down. There is no year I don't build more than 100 boats. I have many customers in Togo. Even my boats are now in Ghana.
My boat now is at Ghana now.
But building itself is not a piece of cake. It entails so many technical details. Dimitru does not only oversee the entire process, he's also directly involved, getting his hands busy. Aside building, they also design boats and their interiors, including furnishings and engineering, in line with safety standards. Most of the materials he uses are locally sourced, and Dimitru says his boats are about some of the most durable you can find anywhere. This is what a finished product looks like. Each of them costs between $2,750 and above, depending on the size.
The one way I used to import them from abroad. Yes.
Imported boats may look flashy, but mine is more rugged than theirs. What I want to do now is that if I have the opportunity, or I can send one of my sons to go and learn how to make the boats look flashy and more attractive. But in terms of durability, I am satisfied.
How to make it flashy.
At a time when the Lagos state government is shifting focus to commercial water transportation to solve the perennial transportation challenge in the city, Dimitru's business is primed for a boom period. He's looking to cashing in by expanding his space and employing more hands in addition to the over 40 already working for him and learning the trade. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Your sports news is coming up after the break. Here's a highlight. Children in Cape Town get a rare chance of playing with Swiss tennis icon Roger Federer.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Time now for your sports news. Swiss tennis icon Roger Federer, who played in South Africa for the first time on Friday against his longtime friend and tennis rival Rafael Nadal, took time after their exhibition match to play with children from a poverty-stricken township near Cape Town. This is part of the Roger Federer Foundation's school readiness interventions for thousands of children in sub-Saharan Africa. The program enables children to learn through play. CGTN's Ronald Del Carmen brings us that story.
As a philanthropist and a father, the education and empowerment of children is a cause close to Roger Federer's heart. Since the Roger Federer Foundation was started 16 years ago, it has spent around $52 million on education initiatives for little kids, and has given over 1.5 million children living in poverty access to better quality education. Federer and Nadal spent time reading and playing with these little ones before they got down to business for their unforgettable match in Africa.
That was so much fun to bring the kindergarten to you guys, because I don't like to bring the media to the kiddies. You know, they don't deserve that. So that was very nice. We love interacting. Raf had a smile on his face the whole time, so that was special for sure.
Well, I love kids. All my life I've been very close to the kids, and I enjoy it a lot, spending time with them. No? And this afternoon have been another opportunity, and it was great to see how good they are. They had a good time, and we had a very good time too. So it's a great work that the Roger Foundation is doing.
The Roger Federer Foundation runs school readiness initiatives in 6 southern African countries, including Botswana, Malawi, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa.
Those kids come from ECD Center from Creche in a township in Hout Bay, and they have no access to any opportunities. They've never been out of the village, they've never come to the stadium, and now they're learning to play games that's going to develop their brain physically and mentally and emotionally, and that's the start of a beautiful life.
Billionaire humanitarian Bill Gates and comedian Trevor Noah also joined Federer and Nadal for a celebrity doubles curtain raiser to help reach the $3.5 million raised at the match in Africa.
38-year-old Roger Federer started his charitable work at the age of 22. For him, giving needy kids a chance at a good education and improving their lives is yet another measure of his success. Renadal.